All right. Today is April 22nd, 2019, and I'm in the home of Jaylyn Wimby, and she's being interviewed for the Deaf, Dying, and Lost Project with interviewer Andrea Hill. So, if you don't mind going ahead and introducing yourself, you can just give us your name.
Hello, my name is Jaylyn Wimby.
All right. And so, first question is just gonna, can you just take us through the, your history of your life? So you can start with where your parents grew up, where you grew up, education and things like that.
Cool. I was born in Lithonia, Georgia, at DeKalb Medical, which is now Emory Hospital, on November 9th, 1995. It was a Thursday. In the afternoon. Uh, for like the first 10 years of my life, I lived over in Lithonia on a little cul-de-sac called Carter Way. I went to whatever type of school that was, elementary school called Bowie Elementary. Um, yeah, and then middle school I went to Chapel Hill Middle, and that's where I met Andrea. Uh, we actually ended up moving after fifth grade in order to get into the district to go to Chapel Hill. So I moved to Decatur when I was like 11 or 12. I don't know. And then after that, I went to high school at Southwest DeKalb, and that's where like my identity started to shape and form into the slightly dead person you see today. And then in college, I got accepted into music school, and I went to school in Boston, Massachusetts, at a school called Berklee College of Music, and I majored in music therapy. I have two siblings. I am the twin, and I am the older twin. I have a fraternal brother. His name is Julius, named after my dad. And then I have an older sister. Her name is Monique, and my mom's name is Gwendolyn. Dad was raised in like the Metro Atlanta area, over near Hollowell Parkway on the west side of the perimeter, and mom was raised in Milledgeville, but she came up to Atlanta for Georgia State, and that's where they met. Well, they actually met working in the hospital, but that's where they met and married or whatever, and then they had us.
Right. Okay.
Great.
And so go just kind of like honing into your life history. Can you tell us about like as growing up, what were the most pivotal experiences with death or dying or loss that you had in your life?
Uh,
And this could be like from when you were younger all the way to like how your age now.
okay. I will try to do my best to remember. I guess like the most like memorable thing. I guess I have a godfather whose dad was still alive, and we used to visit him a lot. And then I guess I was like maybe 9 or 10. Like I remember just going over there, and he wasn't there anymore. And we asked what happened, and they told us that he died, and I didn't really understand that meant that he wasn't alive anymore. I guess I kind of equated it to him just leaving and like out of the house, because they never explained to me like he actually moved on or passed away or whatever, because I was raised in a Christian religion or whatever, so heaven and all that stuff was pretty common, but like they never equated death to all that stuff. Yeah, like that was like 9 or 10, and then when I was like, it's got to be middle school. When I was like 12 or 13, somewhere just before the beginning of sixth grade, we had a dog, and we were over by the church that I went to when I was younger, and he managed to run out of the front doors of the church, and he got hit in the middle of the street, and
Wait, I'm sorry. Let's slow down. Let's go one by one. So going back to you said that you had the first experiences with your.
I don't actually know what he was, because technically my godfather is my second cousin, but I don't know what his relation was to me.
Right. Okay. So that man.
Yeah.
And you said you were 9 or 10 when that happened, and so like before that, you had like real no experience with death prior to that first situation.
Like things had happened, but I had never really had like a personal connection to them. Like friends of the family had passed away, or like I had heard in conversation that so and so died. Like I had attended a couple of funerals, but it was never anybody that I personally knew. And then of course, like every kid kind of knows when a person dies in like a cartoon or a movie or something, but like you don't really, I don't think about like the connotation of what's actually happening, or like the consequence of it, besides, oh, this is a movie and that person's dead. You don't actually put like the feeling behind it, you know.
Right. And so you were saying that at that point what were your feelings towards him dying? Like, was it more so like your family? Like, what kind of death communication did your parents have with you about that situation?
There really wasn't any communication. Like one day we just went over there and he wasn't there anymore, and we were just kind of like, what happened to him? And they were just like, oh, he's moved on, and that was enough for me, I guess, because I didn't ask any more questions. But the house always felt quieter, I guess. They never really explained to us what that meant. Besides, he just wasn't in the house anymore. So
Right. And so, would you say that situation, like at that moment, like did you really understand the concept of death, or was it just like he just moved on and that's what they told me? So I kind of was just like, okay.
yeah, kind of the second one. It was kind of just like, oh, he's gone now.
Right. Thing. Okay. Cool. Okay, so let's keep going to the one with the dog.
Okay. And then when I was around 12 or 13, before I was entering my first year of middle school, we had a dog that my dad actually adopted from some kid that was like the boss's kid from where he used to work. And we brought him home. And one day, it was me and my brother. We were up at the church with my dad because my dad used to do IT stuff. We had brought the dog with us and we couldn't find him for a couple minutes. We were just like, where did the dog go? And we were looking around, and then I managed to look outside, and like I saw him in the middle of the street kind of getting run over a couple of times. His body had already been dead by a couple of minutes by then. And it was so interesting because like I guess I don't know, like I figured he was heavy, but I had never really picked up the dog because he was close to my brother. But like picking up the dog, like it was kind of like this like dead weight, and his head kind of lolled to the side, and his eyes are all bloodshot and stuff. And it was really interesting because like I was affected, but not at the sight of the corpse. It was more like, wow, this dog was really over here dead. And that was like my first instance of being like, so this is what it means to like see a dead body. Not even in the sense of like it was frightening or scary. It was just the stillness that inhabited the corpse was just, it was, cause I don't even know how to explain it. Like that he was just so animated, because even though he was an older dog, he always, there was an energy that he always had, and just to see him completely still, like it was, there were like little bits of gravel in his mouth, and his tongue was lolled up on the side, and it was just, there was like a gash from where he got hit, and the driver didn't stop. It was really, it was weird. And then we brought the dog back, and we put it in the back of my dad's truck, and we brought it to the house, and like all of us were crying. We were just like, no, not Linus. And then I remember my brother asked if we could bury him in the backyard, and my mom was like, we can't. Like, when eventually he'll start stinking. And I was like, what? Like, he can't bathe. He's dead. And I was like, oh, like the body's gonna rot and stuff. And I guess that was like my first instance of realizing, like, once something's dead, like even though that thing isn't there, it still exists, which is not a very good explanation, but like it's still tangible in a sense. Yeah, so that was like my first understanding of death. And then
what did you do with the dog?
That's a great question. I actually don't remember. I'm pretty sure dad took him and did some, I think dad actually took him and buried him somewhere else, but mom wouldn't let us bury him in the backyard because she was like, we already live next to a creek. I don't want a creek and the dog smelling up the house. So that was like when I was 13. And then there were a lot of deaths in high school. And that was like my first instance of like truly feeling detached in a sense. Like I knew, not detached is kind of a cold, but like getting numb to the effects because I had seen it. I think like it must have been, yeah, that was 10th grade. In 10th grade, I had someone in my section die, and it was like the first time I had actually been attended to an open casket funeral. And it was so weird seeing the body with like makeup and whatever that chemical is that they stuff them with. But it's just really interesting because like when I think of the girl, like I see her in the casket first, and then I think of her alive, which I think says a lot about how I perceived that moment. But like by the end of 12th grade, we had played at so many funerals and like done so many memorial services. I was just kind of like, oh yeah, that somebody else died. That sucks. And then, you know, just kind of growing up in Black communities, you kind of hear about people who pass away due to like gang violence and stuff. So there's always that. Um, yeah, so that was high school, and then college happened.
I'm sorry. Let's go back to high school. Let's just let's dive into that a little bit more if you're okay with it. Well, I mean, like, what would you say was the hardest thing about losing your friend in high school? Like I know you were talking about how, like, in ways feeling this feeling of detachment, but what else would you say was something that really stuck in your mind about that moment, or like you losing somebody who you were close to and was also so young?
I was mostly just angry because the first kid who died got this really big celebration, and like they made shirts and there was all of these things that happened, and then the other girl died and like she got a funeral, and then the next day passed as if nothing had even happened. And I was just like, how dare we equate this one person's life to celebration and memoriam and all of these other things, and then when this person dies they get it. That's sad. She was so young, and we move on. Like, what, how do you equate a human life to something as simple as a darn, she passed really young, versus we should do all of these things to memorialize her? Like, I think a human life should be equal to another human life. I think it was mostly just anger. To answer your question, long rambling, I was mostly angry, and then I was sad because we found out she was pregnant, and I was like, dang, that's kind of like a buy one get one free on the death scale. So I was super upset. And then after that, I was mostly angry at myself because we talked about her the next year and we all got her fucking last name wrong. We were just like, it's not even been 365 days and we called this person the wrong girl. And we were all just disappointed in ourselves and really just astounded at the depravity that we had managed to show in like 5 minutes. We're just like, thank you so much for finally recognizing this person exists. And then we realized as the night was ending, like, that's not her name at all. It was just it was humbling, I think, because we had stood by in this righteous anger for 7-8 months. And then we got down to it, and it was just like, turns out we didn't really care that much either, I guess. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay, yes, we can go, keep moving. If you have anything else you wanted to share about that moment. I mean, I think it's really interesting what you're bringing up this point about how there's sometimes, you know, this death hierarchy that we make between people. And people, you know, make it's usually mostly made between like, oh, if an older person dies, then it's not as bad as when a younger person dies, or if it's like a baby.
Yeah.
But you made an interesting point about how even when it's two young people, like, people memorialize their lives different based off of what people thought they were, like, yeah, while they were living. And I think you bring up an interesting point that a life is a life, you know, and it shouldn't be one person over the other, you know, like, if we're gonna celebrate or we're gonna remember somebody in their death, it should be the same for everybody. So that death hierarchy is really interesting that you brought up. And also you were also saying something about like being angry that people didn't celebrate your friend in the same way, and then months later, you know, you and your friends didn't remember how to like say her name or spell her name. Like what kind of feeling did that have? Like, because that's just a very like interesting thing about like how time and just, I don't know, you have so many other things going on in your life that sometimes you don't remember things as much. I don't know.
Honestly, the thing was for us, like, for us there was only one girl with that name because we were in band together and there was another girl with that name, but we never really paid attention to that girl because for us it was only that one girl. I'll use a different name for the sake of this video so I don't have to say that girl all the time. For us, it was only one Elizabeth, and so another girl in band also had the name Elizabeth, and so the person said the other Elizabeth's last name, and we were all like, yeah, finally. And then we realized that's not Elizabeth's last name because they was both the first name, and then they both had a last name with the same initial as the first letter. So we were just like, that doesn't sound right, but it took one of us being like, wait, that's not right. You were like, oh crap, you're absolutely right. It was just, it was humbling, but it was also just super depressing. I would also like to apologize midway through this interview. It's been a couple of months since I've been in a scholarly setting, so if I stumble over my words, grad students, you know what I'm saying, don't lacerate me in class. But I don't know. It was just super humbling to see that even though we kind of prided ourselves in being like, this is a person and this is a person, at the end of the day, we kind of still managed to cram them into this space of, this is a dead person. And I think that made a lot of difference in how we chose to memorialize them in our head, I guess. Also, going back to the first person who I was angry that got this huge celebration and stuff, I remember thinking because she died, well, they died in a car crash trying to avoid this dog. And I have a dog currently. And I'm just like, if there's a dog in the middle of the street, I'm not going to kill myself or the passengers in my car trying to avoid the dog. Like, I will definitely run headfirst into this dog. And I'm just like, you don't know if that dog has like a soul or animal death hierarchy. Like, you don't know what's going on in that dog's life to just callously be like, oh, that dog's gotta go. If it's me or the dog, it's definitely the dog. And you ever think about the same way with like bugs and stuff, like how you just kind of like kill a bug or a spider and then think about, wow, even though technically speaking it's not like murder, like it's still, you kill the spirit, like you killed the soul. No, anyway, but yeah, I was mostly just disgusted with myself, to come back around to the point. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
That was good. Yeah, we could just keep going to the next experience. What was you're saying college. I think you jumped to college.
Thank you. And then college happened. We had another death from a classmate in the beginning of college. Once again, I wasn't that close to the person, but everybody else in our class was super affected. And so I mourned with them, but I wasn't necessarily mourning for her. It was more like, dang, my classmates are really sad right now. I'm here with y'all spiritually. And then halfway through college, like my junior year, my grandma died, and I had never been really close with my grandma. She kind of, I don't want to say she was from a generation where she definitely favored the guys of the family better than the females, but she was from that generation. And so she kind of always treated my sister and I at a distance, which was interesting because as a kid, I could tell she really liked me, but she hated my mom and she definitely hated my sister, but for some reason she kind of liked me. And then as I got older, I was just like, if you don't, well, I can't swear. But then I was like, if you don't ride with me or my sister, then you'll ride with none of us type thing. And then she died, and I didn't like my grandma at her death because at that time she was a financial burden. She was making my dad lose like weeks of sleep, and he had to escort her to and from the perimeter, and she was super ungrateful. And she still accused us of stealing from her house. And every time we were over there, she just always had this like undisguised hatred of my mother. And I was just like, I personally, you could like keel over dead and I wouldn't care. And then she actually died, and I found myself in my program chair. What is it? Director's office? Sure. I was in my director's office, like huddled in a corner like an emo kid crying. And she was like, what are you doing? Are you skipping class? And I was like, yeah, my grandma just died. And it was super funny because I was a student employment at the time, and my boss was just like, I love my grandma. And I remember saying the week before, I was like, I hated my grandma. She was like, oh, okay. And I'm over here crying in the corner about my grandma, and I wasn't even sad. I was mostly just upset that she had the audacity to go and die after all the crap that she put my family through without even saying thank you to my dad or like I'm sorry to my mom or doing anything freaking helpful. She just died. Like, I get it, she was old and she had a lot of health problems, but like the audacity to be this freaking burden for years, and then you get to just leave, and we're still... Sorry, the point is, yeah, she died in junior year, and then...
No, by all means, if you want to keep going, you can.
No, I was just...
You would like to keep sharing about your grandma.
I was just upset. Like, I was sad she died, but, like, I was mostly upset that she had the audacity to die. Like, supposedly, my dad says people on the maternal line of his family is supposed to live forever. and she was like 89 and she died. And I was like, forever means at least 100, and you got don't laugh. But yeah, and then I wanted to fly home because I was in Boston. I might have mentioned earlier, and the funeral was in what city is that? It was in Atlanta, but what side of the what? I forget which cemetery it was, but on the west side of Atlanta over there. And they were like, you don't have to fly home. She knows that you would have wanted to attend or whatever. And I was mostly just there to make sure a fight didn't break out between my uncle and my dad, who hadn't been talking at that point. But yeah, just mostly upset that she died. Not even the fact that she's dead. It's just like, you couldn't give me 4 more years, a year and a half maybe. Yeah, and it's really always been interesting because my mom doesn't ever talk about people dying or like funerals or like people passing over at all. I think in her head she still thinks we're like those same kids who kind of didn't know what happened to, I'm gonna call him my great uncle because I don't know what the relationship is, who don't really know what happens to their great uncle. Like they just kind of float away. It's like she knows for a fact now that we've all experienced death in some capacity, that she still like refuses to talk about when her brother died. She has 7 brothers, and 3 of them died the past couple of years, and she didn't want us to go to any of their funerals. And
I mean, but do you ever? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please, by all means.
Oh, I was gonna say, do you ever think that, or did you ever get any inclination growing up that your mother's lack of communication with you and your siblings was at a point about protecting her kids, but now that you're older, more it may be about her own lack of like understanding or like acceptance of death, like in her own way, so she kind of projects that onto you guys?
Not to sound callous, I don't really care what it is. I just think at some point she does have to talk about it. It's less about either one of us accepting what's happening and more about her being like, this is a fact of life for me. Because at this point, I'm kind of just like, yep, people die. But
do you think that that's hard though for some people to like really? Because it sounds like you've definitely gone through some complicated deaths, is a word that we've learned in the class. And
complicated deaths, eh?
Yeah, and it seems like sometimes that can make accepting, death being a hard, or just death, dying, loss. It can be a hard thing for people to accept.
Probably. And
all right.
I don't know what you want me to like. I don't know what you want me to say at that point. Like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. We're gonna die someday. Like, sheltering yourself from it or sheltering your children from it doesn't make it any less apparent. Like, it sucks having to explain death to a kid because there are all these new concepts that they're getting. But at the same time, like, acting like it doesn't exist is almost worse in a sense, because you've gone past the point of numbing yourself. You're just kind of shielding yourself from an inevitable fact. Like, even if you have plants that die, like, what are you going to tell the kid? The plant moved on to another place? Like, it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It's if you think of life as a cycle, like, it's just starting the cycle over, I think. I've also had time to ruminate on this, so, there's that. But, yeah. This is also a very interesting interview, mostly due to the fact that I can only see your hands gesturing.
Right. And yeah, so I do think that's very interesting about how you're saying that you should accept things, but I do think that sometimes it can be hard for people to really come to terms with that, even if it is an inevitable thing that happens in our life. But yeah, like, so going back to what you were saying about the next experience with your grandmother, I don't think you really finished the story that you were telling about that though.
I'm just angry that she died. Like,
are you still angry about that, or you're just kind of just expressing that with what you feel in the moment?
I'm just expressing it. I'm mostly just upset that she died. Like, I was just like, how dare you, useless sack of flesh. You didn't get anything. It's just like, you know how people grow up and they always tell you, hey, I love going over grandma's house because you get like love and cookies and cuddles. It's just like, you deprived us of having this grandmotherly experience. I don't know what happened to my granddad on my mom's side. My grandma on my mom's side is dead. My grandfather on my dad's side had a heart attack when he was younger. So it's like, you're the only thing I have left. And it's just like, you're the worst experience anyone could possibly have. And like, it's probably not fair to be angry at her because she's still, even though it's been 60 years, like she never really got over the death of her husband. And she probably had some form of onset dementia. But like at the same time, shape it up. If you can be a great grandma for the other cousins, like the least you can do when we go over there is like pretend like you like us. But yeah. So that happened junior year. And then senior, well, I don't want to say senior year because we do it based off of terms, not really years. But like 8th/9th semester, I had my own type of, what a perfect time to just, you know what I'm saying, cut the, the Greek fable where they were like cutting the string. I was gonna say kill the chicken, but I couldn't think of a better analogy. My bad. Death and dying class. So I had my own little little experience with like wanting to die and all that other stuff. And it got super heavy at one point. I was thinking of what practicum I was in at the time, because I think that might have also affected it, because at the time my grandma died, I was in the older adults practicum, so I was working with people who had Alzheimer's and dementia. So not only did I have to deal with the fact that my grandma died, but like I was having to constantly go to people who were dealing with the same thing. They still liked people and lived life and liked to smile and stuff. And then, I was in my psych practicum. So I was in the mental health part of my practicum when I went through my own little flop with fencing match with death, if you will. So I think that also might have impacted a little bit. But yeah, I was on suicide watch, and in Massachusetts they had this thing called the BEST team, which is pretty much like 911 for people who are like in mental health crises or whatever. And where was I? I might have just been on my regular doctor's checkup or whatever, and the lady was just like, so they're highly considering putting you in like an outpatient unit. And I was like, I can't do that. It's literally 2 days before spring break. My parents will kill me if I don't get home. And I think that's the only reason why mom's gonna not like me for taking that feather out of that pillow. But and then I think that's the only reason why they didn't let me stay an overnight unit thing, because they were just like, if you're going home with your family, that'll probably help. Little do they know. But yeah. And then I came back, and I wasn't super suicidal anymore, but I still made death jokes a lot, which I realize now probably wasn't the best thing to make for people who were worried about you dying. But I've gotten a lot better with it now. I still think they're funny, but I don't say it as loud as much because it makes people uncomfortable. And then,
well, actually, let's pause there because I think that's a very interesting thing, because that's also been something that has been mentioned a lot in the class about how laughter is in ways a healthy part of dealing with loss in any kind. So or humor, is something that's very helpful in when you're dealing with a death process and things like that. And so even through your own experience, how do you think humor helps you, not only cope but really come to terms with what's going on with you? And if you don't mind, like if it's okay to share, like what like, I don't even know if that's appropriate to ask, but like,
go ahead and ask anyway. And if I don't like it, I just won't answer it.
Okay, so like, you were saying that you were going through the death of your grandmother, and you were in your psych or your mental health practicum. So like, what was going on in your life that like brought you to that point? Like, was it just like the pressure from school, or like was it something that you had always been thinking about, or like what was it?
Honestly, bruh, like it wasn't anything different. Like school sucked, but school had always sucked. Like I had never really liked academia. I felt like I couldn't really express what was going on to my parents and my family because we had never really had, I don't want to say never really had, but there was never an environment of talking about emotions in my house, so I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was fucking sorry. I'm sorry.
It's fine. You can curse.
Okay, I was miserable, I guess, in Boston because it was cold and snowy and wet. I don't like any of those adjectives that I just said. I was just tired, honestly. And I guess in high school it was okay because even though I was tired, like I was surrounding myself with like friends and music and stuff, mostly music, no offense to my friends, but music and stuff, it was just like, it was fun being a musician. And then I went to music school and they took the essence of creating art and expression and kind of boiled it down to how successful you're going to be, and these are the rules of counterpoint, and if you're following a guideline to art, then you're not a real artist. But at the same time, here are the top 10 steps to make it on Billboard. And everything was super competitive, and that was like the first time since elementary school that I had ever been in a school setting where most of my classes were male dominated. And then I got into music therapy and it was female dominated. But then I got back into my regular classes and it was mostly boys, and they're so dumb. Like, it's so hard talking to men sometimes because it's just like, y'all have no concept of anything. It was just, I think everything just kind of swirling around and together into this whole mantra of like, I could die right here and be like chill. Because at the time, I'd never really believed in like a heaven or like moving on. I just like, if I slit my throat, like that was it. I think that's what helps some people, I think, who are thinking of dying, like the whole threat of self-inflicted death makes you go to hell, or I'm not going to claim to know anything about religions, but I think that helps stop some people. But for me, I was just like, if I die, like the worst that can happen is that I wake up like in a Matrix type thing and I have to do it over again in the body of a hamster. But
so you're saying that you believe in reincarnation?
I don't. That's what you chose to get out of that. No, I'm saying.
It was simply a question. I just want to, for clarification
I'm just saying,
purposes.
like, I don't have anything to look forward to.
So you're saying that you don't believe in an afterlife? In the religious context.
Yeah.
So what do you think happens?
Darkness. Inky darkness. You know what's cool? I always thought in some of my more optimistic moments that we turn into stars. But that's kind of not logical because stars are compressed gas. But I figure if people can believe in a guy who flooded the earth, then I can believe in us turning into stars. So, but yeah, I just think if you die, like, that's it.
So are you? This is interesting. So would you say that religion plays any part in your like views of afterlife or anything like that?
I don't think so. It was really interesting you said that though, because a couple of months ago, my Catholic friend and I got into this super heated debate because she knew that I was on suicide watch. And she had not the audacity, because she was looking out for me, but she was just like, I feel like you can't make a healthy opinion about suicide because you're so close to the issue. And I said, first of all, ma'am, what we're not going to do is sit here and play the close to the issue card, because I told you that in confidence. And I guess I was just mostly upset because throughout college, her and my like boss and my academic director, they were both like, you make a lot of assumptions about things. And I was just like, I'm making a lot of assumptions about things, but here you guys are, all three of which are Catholic, by the way. Here you guys are assuming that when we die, right, we're gonna go to a better place. Like, what type of, I make assumptions, but here you are talking guys making like the biggest assumption about one of the most important, not a decision, because everyone's gonna die regardless of if you choose to or not, but like one of the most important transitions in your life. But I'm a jerk because I'm making an assumption that this teacher shouldn't be teaching. Like, what? Like, in the grand scheme of things, I feel like my assumption is less impactful than yours, but whatever. What was the question?
Well, the question was really, what you're answering the question.
Oh, afterlife. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we just die. I think it gives people hope. If something happens afterward. But I don't really think, in the grand scheme of things, hope is always necessarily a good thing. I think if we taught people more to accept that death is an inevitable circumstance rather than like a reward system, people would be less afraid of confronting it. Because now I think the climate of death is looking at it as if I do a good job while I'm on Earth, I go to a good death place, but if I'm a terrible person, I go to a bad death place. And I think if we just kind of maybe equated to more like, regardless of you being a good person or a bad person, like we're gonna go to the same place, it would probably help.
Well, then wouldn't it make it not matter?
Well, I mean, it like it doesn't though. Is what I'm trying to say. Like I think, ding dong. Please ask your question, interviewer.
No, so I was asking, so that's your feelings about the afterlife, things like that. What do you think? So why would it matter, like what you do in life?
I just think that if you're gonna be a good person, it shouldn't be based off a morality system. Like I think that the genuineness behind being a kind and compassionate person gets questioned if at the end of the day it's because you don't want to suffer internal damnation. Like I think you should be a good person because you want to be a good person, whatever the objective good definition is for your chosen lifestyle. Like if you want to go around murdering people, fine. If you want to go around helping little babies, fine. But like don't do it based off of the fact that at the end of your own life you're going to be going to this type of Elysium type paradise. Like it should be based on the fact that you only get to live for 80 or 90 years. Do what you think be the best in those 80 or 90 years.
Okay. And so going back to your own experiences with suicide and things like that, what do you think was the I don't really know the appropriate term for it, but what do you think helped you through that situation?
Oh, I just got over it. Like I never really, I don't think you, well, I can't speak for everyone, but you don't ever really get through it. You just kind of handle it. You don't ever really like get it.
Yes, I feel like through it was a bad phrase. I didn't know, but how, I guess in ways, how do you manage it? And like, is it always present in you, or is it just it's one of those ebb and flow type of situations?
I think it's just kind of. I've been questioning that myself. So right now I'm currently on medication, what I think helps a lot, because before there was always a lot of like noise and static, and now it's a lot quieter, and I think that helps temper it a little bit. But I think it also, like, it is more of like an ebb and flow type thing. Like you always, it's kind of like eating something you know you're not supposed to eat when you're on a diet. Like now that you know, once you've had a taste of it or like a glimpse of it, like you kind of always know what it tastes like in the back of your palate, which is a terrible analogy, but I couldn't think of anything better. Kind of like that. Like you don't ever get rid of the feeling or sensation. You just kind of have to put it on a scale. Like with me ending my life better, and then that kind of branches off into other aspects, like by bettering my life and everything it entails, like my relationship, like how would it affect the people that I'm close to, my career choice, like how would that affect the people that I work with, how would that affect my day-to-day living situations. You kind of have to put everything in a pros and cons list, I think. So
that's really interesting, because in ways, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that, I mean, because you just said that like you don't really believe in that there's an afterlife, things like that, and that people should just be good people or bad people because, that's what they want to do. But then in the same way, you're saying that, having the feeling of like, suicide and things like that is ebb and flow, and you think about it like, well, pros and cons, like I wouldn't want to do this because it would affect said person, instead of like, you should just want to not do it because you just want to live today.
Well, That's a very valid point.
I guess those two things are not the same thing, but I just want to know your thoughts.
I don't know. I guess at this point I'm kind of struggling with the whole "I could go either way" symptom that I've managed to exude. Like, just I think it's less. I don't know how to explain it in a way that's articulate, but like I'm currently at the point where I could go either way, where I know it's not a healthy mentality to have, but at the same time, like I could go either way, and I know I would be fine. But I think if you're contemplating something like that, and I think this is also just a little bit of the student therapist in me coming out, because we've been taught about the effects death has on people you're close to and so on and so forth. But I think if you're gonna make a decision like that, like I don't want to say you should consider people in your life, because at some point the people in your life are also indirectly responsible for you wanting to die. But I think if you reach that point, then like there isn't really a decision. It's just going through with the act. It's just I think it's just kind of climbing, or like walking on a sprained ankle or something. Like you just kind of have to, like, it hurts, but like at the end of the day, if you stop and let it heal, like yeah, that wasn't very succinct, but
no, that was good. It's okay. We can move on from that. So your own experience. And so what would be the next experience in your life?
Oh, and then Dad, I came back from school and I'm in a process of like hunting for an internship or whatever. Because in music therapy, technically speaking, you're not allowed to practice until you get all your internship hours. I also don't have a degree, which makes me upset. But that's a long story and not for this interview. Regardless, I'm waiting for my internship and stuff, and maybe end of October, early November, Dad had to go to a hospital for a minor heart attack and stuff, and he had to get heart bypass surgery and all these other things. And I remember my brother being super upset because he was just like, Dad is in the hospital on his deathbed. Why can't you take anything seriously? Well, he doesn't sound like that, but that's how I make my brother sound in my head, because he's a little whiny bitch. And then the guy came in and he was just like, you guys should have a will prepared just in case, things go bad on the operating table. And everybody was super stressed out. And I was just like...
Wait, I'm sorry. When you say a will, do you mean an advanced directive, or you mean a will?
Like a will. Like, they were just like, in case this operation heads south, like...
Oh, so they never told you guys anything about advanced directives or anything like that?
Nah. Well, if they did, it wasn't when I was there. The only time I had heard about the wills when I was in the room with my dad.
No, okay. Well, just for clarification, wills and advanced directives are different.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, if there was a talk of advanced directive and they shared it with my mom, she never shared it with us.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, he was just like, why can't you ever take anything seriously? Dad's in the hospital. Why is everything a joke to you? And I felt bad because I couldn't tell him, like, at this point, life is just one long black comedy. But at the same time, it's just like, if all of us are crying about Dad dying, like, one of us has to be able to tell the doctor, thank you for your help all those years in medical school. I know you did the best you could do. Like, it wouldn't help if all of us broke down at the same time. So, yeah, that was my most recent thing with that. And then after that happened in like January, February, and my shrink says I haven't really dealt with that fully. I'm arguing with her on that. Not even based on the fact that I disagree with her, mostly just the fact that I like arguing with my shrink. And then in January and February, my uncle died. My Uncle Roy. And I actually do remember my Uncle Roy a lot, because we used to drive down to Milledgeville, and he had this gravely voice because he used to smoke and drink whiskey all the time. He just sounded like he like chewed rocks all the time. I thought it was so cool. He died, and Mom didn't want us to go to the funeral, and I was super upset about it, because I was like, you can't take this experience from that. And then I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I was like, I don't care. But Uncle Roy died, and then it's April now, and thankfully in between the 2 months that that's happened and this happens, no one else is died. But yeah.
Right. So we're gonna go back to your dad, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, like walking me through that experience a little bit more. So like, what impact did that have on you? Like having that conversation with your brother, and then like your brother telling you, you know, you should take things more seriously, and you're trying to be strong for your family, but like, what kind like though that was the persona that you took on for your family in that situation, what like once that situation kind of just started to settle down a bit, like what was some of the things that you had to bring up with things? Because you also talked about that you went to therapy. Did you start therapy before this, or
It was before. They don't let you take meds unless you're talking to someone in case you start having like visions or whatever. That's probably not the real reason, but that's the only reason I got. Yeah, it was before. Honestly, I was mostly tired because I was sleeping in the hospital beds. I was numb because I was tired. Um, I hated having to drive up to Sandy Springs every day because he was in St. Joe's. Um, I was mostly just tired and exhausted. I didn't really have room for anything else. I don't know if you guys have ascertained this from this interview, but I don't really have a lot of emotional depth at this point in my life. So I really am only allowed to feel like two things at a time, and I'm usually always tired. So that means the other one's got to be like very prominent. Um, yeah, I was mostly just ready for it to end, and I realized that it's super callous because I love my dad, and he's just a big teddy bear. But like, if he died, like I would have been devastated and hurt. But like, he would have been dead. Like, I probably would have cried over it a little bit and made sure everybody is okay. But like, I don't know what else I was supposed to do at that point besides be like, dang, they took another Julius. Because my grandpa also died of a heart attack when he was pretty young. Um, did that answer your question?
yes, yes. And so sorry. So then go back to your uncle Roy.
Yep, he died of lung cancer. That's all I got. That's all I know of that situation.
Okay. And so like so taking all these situations and these experiences in your life, what would you say has been like a collective theme or just something that has been very apparent as these situations have gone on through your life, or that's been a major um just a major focus for you as far as like death in your life?
People be out here dying. Like there's really nothing else. It doesn't really matter what they're doing, what they're not doing. Death is she's pretty. She doesn't see color. You know what I'm saying? Like she just kind of swoops in and grabs you.
Why is death a woman?
Why not? If God's a guy, death can be a woman. Like I'm just randomly assigning people genders at this point. Like I can use they if that makes you feel any better.
It was merely a question.
I mean, I call honestly, I would call that clock a she. Like it doesn't very base level. Also it irritates people when I say death is a she. Also, but in poems, a lot of people refer to death as women, mostly just because women are the bane of Earth's existence. So. What, you haven't noticed that? That's like a reoccurring theme. Anytime something bad, woman. Rip pillow, there's a woman. Notice how the chandelier and the clock in Beauty and the Beast were guys, but the witch is a woman. How come there's never any tales about an old warlock cursing people?
There are.
Okay. I didn't need to hear that. I was on my high horse. But I'm saying, like, the majority of the stories, like, Disney always has evil stepmoms. You never hear of a stepdad beating and raping the kid. Like, you know.
Right.
Shut up. Let me have this. Edit this out of your video if you want to.
Okay, so... Okay, so again, going back collectively thinking about your experiences, what is something that you would have liked to have been done better? Or what is something that you would have liked, as far as just like the overall communication about death, dying, and loss? Would you have liked to have been different, or you would have done different? You know.
I would have liked to have learned about death before I got introduced to the concept of an afterlife. Mostly just because I think that the concept of afterlives is problematic. But like I learned earlier on that heaven and hell existed, and then death existed, and I think if I had to go back and like do a weird time turning thing, I'd be like, hey, death exists out of these two concepts, and it's okay to not really understand that as a child. Also, like, probably a little healthier way of expressing the turmoil I was going through, but it probably helped. But damage is done now, so it's like.
I mean, but you don't think that there's a way to make that better?
Well, I mean,
I think it's that's very true that life just things happen and it's not like you have a time machine to go change things. But I think that there's a and please stop me if you don't agree, but I think that there's I guess there's knowledge and power and knowledge. Like the more you know about something, the better you can do about making it different. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, that was the more you know. I didn't want to say it out loud though, because you had a point that you were making.
Yeah, and then my point was just saying, like, now that you're able to articulate what you would have done better, I think that there's.
That's a strong word. I'm able to fumble through what I think I should have gone better.
Yes, that's also true. I guess we'll just stick with that.
Wow. Okay. But yeah, people be out here dying. You can either roll with it or roll against it, but eventually you're gonna be out here dying too. You know what I'm saying?
How would you explain that to a child, though? I find that I think I find your experience or your ideal about death to be in ways very morbid, but also very honest. And I just wonder, like, if you had to explain that to a kid or to somebody who was just, I don't know,
like
before they even saw it, like, what would you say?
What can I get a more condensed scenario? Like, can you give me actual details?
It's a kid.
But I don't get no background.
No, it's a child who has never experienced death. Like they saw it on a TV show, and now they're like, "Hey, Jaylyn, what is this? What am I supposed to think about this?"
Okay, I'd be like, you know how you have your favorite cookie? You know how you have a chocolate chip cookie. You ate that cookie. That cookie's gone now. Now, of course, you can regurgitate it, but like it wouldn't be the same type of cookie. You know what I'm saying? So now that you've digested that cookie and you've excreted it, that cookie's gonna come back as something else, but it's never gonna be that cookie.
Solid. It was really solid work.
I'm great with kids, as you can see.
Right. Okay. It's
honestly, I don't even know, bruh. Like, I just be like, I think it would depend on how sensitive the child was. I think children covet and value honesty. Oh, the camera. And honesty. So I'd probably be like, little Timmy, everybody has to move on. You know how the plants die, not die. You know how the plants wilt in the fall and they're silent in the winter and then they start growing again in the spring. The human life cycle is kind of like that. We all start to wilt in the fall and we're silent in the winter, but we grow again in the springtime. And I think if you equate your house plant that you have that your mother never waters to maybe your grandpa that's no longer receiving any water, then you can kind of put them in the same category. Is that better than my cookie analogy?
This is your history. Whatever you say is totally fine.
No.
No, it really is. And but I guess my last question would be, what are your opinions about your ideal death situation?
I don't know, bro. Okay. Probably painful, just to have one last sensation. I always told my shrink if I had to die, I wanted it to be violent, so I could feel it as it was seeping out. Like I would want like a slash or a jab or like something constant before you wink out of existence. Like a burst. Just one last experience. I mean, sure, passing in your sleep would be like the, I guess, the safer option, but like going out in a bang, probably not even a slow. Okay, let me not be like a slow, painful death, but like slow enough to feel it, but not slow enough to like make it torturous. Just sharp enough so that you can know you're having this one. Just sharp enough so you can kind of have that fleeting thought of I'm going to die, and then being scared, and then not existing. Just one last pretense of being human, and then dying.
Well, thank you for talking with us today and sharing your story with us.
Thank y'all for coming to my TED Talk.
All right.